Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Found Friday. This is the last in a series we've been doing for the last few weeks on enterprise SEO platforms and what the choices are out there right now. And so this week we're talking about, should you still be using an enterprise SEO platform? Over the last few weeks, we've really been talking about kind of what makes a platform enterprise versus not enterprise, and some of the movement we've seen in terms of users' evolving needs and how tools are handling, or in some cases not handling, these changes. So I've talked about how there seems to be kind of a growing chasm between users who simply want data without a need for a lot of analysis or insight as they're exporting or integrating it into other platforms, combining with additional sources, or conducting analysis themselves. And then those people who are looking for a full service platform that really manages multiple sites, provides recommendations, handles workflow, and automates things like reporting. So obviously, there are some people out there who still want kind of a mid-sized solution, but it really seems as though fewer and fewer of those options exist or stay around for very long, or they do exist, but more as like niche solutions as opposed to kind of a real search and content fully integrated marketing tool. Like it may serve one specific purpose, but not kind of an all-encompassing feature-rich situation. So during the first conversation in the series, we reviewed some things that I'd heard people talk about in terms of what makes a platform enterprise. So what that ended up breaking down into was volume of data. So basically talking about kind of the number of tracked keywords, pages, competitors, volume of exports, things like that. Data availability and sophistication, which referred to more the type of data you can collect, such as local, mobile insights available. Can you look at and analyze competitor content, that sort of thing. Integration, so does the tool integrate with other platforms, have an API, bring additional sources in if you need to. And then organization and management, so what kind of that entails is stuff like account management and onboarding support, automated reporting, white labeling of the dashboard and other reports inside of it, workflow, task management, kind of all of those other items that would make a platform kind of more enterprise. So I also discussed some of the issues around platform choice on Edge of the Web Radio podcast with Aaron Sparks, Douglas Carr, and Tom Broadbeck a few weeks ago. And one of the things that came from that conversation was that they brought up, kind of this growing list of issues that SEOs and marketers have in sharing information. How do you really get these teams to work together effectively? And what does a platform that even supports that really look like? And what are kind of the key elements of getting everybody on the same page? So even if you have this enterprise SEO platform, how can you actually get data to people in a way that they can consume it? That conversation was really great and kind of in depth. So I would, we'll put the link to that show in the blog post and in the show notes, but definitely go take a look at that, because that's coming from industry experts and journalists who really also are kind of seeing a lot of the same conversations and problems that everybody else is. So as I'm perusing my newsfeed the other day, I see this article on Search Engine Land titled "Should You Still Be Using an Enterprise SEO Platform" by a columnist, Ian Bowden. So of course, I immediately click on it while saying to myself, hell yes, you should. But then I think back on everything we've been discussing and I reflect, well, maybe not. So, maybe if you're not actually going to use the functionality or don't need all these things, maybe you don't need an enterprise SEO platform. Maybe you just need some volume data exports. And if you can get that from kind of a one-off solution, maybe that's your answer. So I'm reading through this article, and I thought this might be kind of a good thing to discuss today, because he starts out by mentioning he's noticed a similar trend. Users challenging whether or not they actually need this enterprise SEO platform, and whether or not, if they think that they don't, if budget could actually be utilized elsewhere for greater gains in the organization. So I want to talk through kind of how Ian breaks down the components of an enterprise tech platform, because his observations are similar somewhat in terms of breakdown, and maybe a little varied, but also a good perspective on kind of whether or not this is still a relevant conversation. So the way that Ian breaks them down into core capabilities of an enterprise SEO platform are performance and insights, technical optimization, forecasting, content marketing, and campaign management. So I agree that these are all really great capabilities. Obviously a little different in kind of how I was approaching it, which was what actually makes a platform termed enterprise. So when we're kind of talking about volume and things like onboarding and scale and things, like I was maybe looking at it a little bit differently. So it's interesting to get somebody else's input, because he's actually works at an agency. So, you know, like not as a tool creator, but more as a tool user. So he also mentioned something that I totally agree with, which is the biggest factor that determines a platform's usefulness is its usage. So I say all the time, the best solution for you is the one that you'll actually use. And it's the same thing I say about like diet and exercise, savings plans, like anything, right? The thing you'll actually do regularly is by far the best option, because even if it's not perfect, using something, even that's not like amazing, is better than having an amazing tool that you never touch. So when he's talking about performance and insights, this is actually the thing that he says is really like the core function of SEO platforms and is the most useful features. So what he's talking about with this is calculating visibility and like understanding kind of search visibility of websites, looking at search volume and applying it to different things, and also looking at kind of like large data sets and being able to really ascertain different visibilities across like a lot of different places. You know, because we as search platform providers have been collecting data for a really long time across huge amounts of stuff, we are actually pretty good at it. And so a lot of times the best possible way to get access to this data is going to be to use like an enterprise search platform. The thing is, this goes back to my constant rant, which is this is really only as useful typically as your ability to set things up and be able to do something with this information once you get it. So this means like grouping keywords and content, creating campaigns, actually being able to segment stuff out so that as you're looking at hundreds, thousands, millions of keywords across a bunch of different content, potentially across a bunch of different sites, the only thing that this kind of really cool insights and performance level data is going to help you do is work on things if you've actually set it up so that you can work on it. Which again, this goes back to the usefulness, right? Part is it's useful based on usage, which means you actually have to spend the time to set it up. So forecasting, he mentions forecasting, kind of talking about you know, being a critical component, not just to secure budget, but to push through recommendations to build a business case for content. What's interesting about forecasting for me is that a lot of times what I feel happens with tools is they want so badly to provide you a forecasting tool is that they will grab some numbers and information and kind of like put them together and then make that kind of a prediction. Or tell you that this is what something should do. One of the problems with this is like if you just take generalized numbers about like CPC or certain types of information about like search volume and click-through rate and all these different ideas, sometimes you're not looking at them industry versus industry, so it may not even be really that relevant to the specific people and audiences that you're looking at, and so your benchmarks may be completely different. Other things with forecasting is like there's not all the data available, right? So like obviously Google doing keywords not provided and some other things going on mean that like nobody really has access to everything. And so we're all making inferences, right? At best case, what we can tell you or what somebody should be able to tell you is the amount of certainty that they have in their methodology and their algorithm. And nobody can tell you that they're completely certain. And if they do, they're wrong. You know, additionally, like what we're talking about too is forecasting and a lot of this methodology needs to be the combination of a lot of different data points from a lot of different areas. So if you have hooked up, you know, Google Analytics or something to your search platform or your search platform's looking at stuff, I mean, when we're talking about traffic and content and click-through rates and conversions and a bunch of other different things, there are so many things happening, right? This should be part of such a larger conversation that hanging your hat completely on that one forecast or expecting it to be dead on accurate all the time or being told that it will be is not a great idea. I think that there's a lot of information, and I think that what we can look to for forecasting is like general trends and directions and a starting point for conversations and a place to say this is the projection. But obviously, you know, a a lot of what forecasting is supposed to be helping you do is not have to take apart all these pieces of data and make the forecast yourself kind of in your own spreadsheet format, right? So for me, the real value in forecasting is saving you the time of trying to make your own statistical inferences about where things should be headed. So the great part about platforms is like we're doing it for you, and we can a lot of times actually look at enough sites and enough content to get a little bit more specific because we have access to it. So we may be able to get more statistically relevant than you are, like with just your site or with just like a subset of sites. So I would say that forecasting is great in terms of saving you the time, but I just warn against anybody that tells you that they have like the best forecasting situation ever, that it's like completely accurate, because no. Okay, so technical optimization. So obviously, one of the things that everybody provides for the most part is like some technical recommendations. Ian mentions that this is an area where he feels like SEO platforms are weaker and could improve. I actually agree, right? So I think that, he mentions that this is an area that generally attracts like a more entry to mid-level SEO person with like scorecards and suggestions and, priorities and things. And I agree to some degree that like this is an area where everyone can improve. If you really look at what it takes to generate something beyond like more basic recommendations, I go back to this thing that I was just talking about with forecasting, which is you have to have, to make really good recommendations, you have to have access to a lot of information, and you have to be industry specific, site specific. You have to get really specific, right? And there's some human element to some of that, right? Where you need to have people checking into this or managing this process more. So when we're talking about looking into SEO recommendations, I know that we at Ginza Metrics are heavily focused on improving the recommendations that we serve to our users. But what we don't want to do is just include recommendations or update recommendations to tell you that we updated them. We want to actually give you recommendations that if you spend the time and resources implementing them, will actually move the needle for you, right? Because I don't want to just give you a list so that you have a list, so that you can say you're doing something. I want the thing that you do to actually help you improve your life. So I would say that if you're going to look at a tool based on the recommendations that they provide, do a little bit of research and understand kind of what exactly it is that doing these things will do for you, like for your site, for your traffic. And if you want to, you should ask the tool provider, like what kinds of things should you expect? They're not gonna be able to give you exact numbers. If they do, that's dangerous territory. But they should be able to tell you, like, yeah, if you correct a lot of these things, like typically this helps X. All right. So content marketing is next on his list. And he says that platforms are missing a real trick here. That there's a lot of debate about how to evaluate a website to understand its algorithmic value and influence, and that page authority and domain authority are only third-party metrics. And that, these metrics are ultimately trying to qualify how trustworthy or authoritative given page is as perceived by search engines. And, Ian's mentioning that, like, he's talking about kind of really understanding SEO and link data and link influence and, a lot of these other things. I think that, so Ian leaves off saying it's fair. He says he thinks it's fair to say that it's not worth investing in an SEO platform with the intention of attaining more link data. However, some content marketing tools are like a nice to have. So I think when we're talking about kind of content marketing tools and link information and a lot of this stuff, everyone, to my knowledge, everyone's trying, right? I don't know a single SEO tool provider out there that's not trying to like figure out a way to crack this idea of how to help people create the most relevant content that will get found and that will do better in terms of influence, that will do better in terms of visibility. We're all working toward it. And I think that we're all working toward it in kind of, a lot of times, kind of similar and adjacent ways. Sometimes people take a new, unique spin on it. All the time that we're working on this, search engines are working on doing things differently so that users have a better experience, and so that we don't create content that just kind of like games the system. So when it comes to like content marketing tools and that integration, I think that content marketing and tools that help with content marketing in general, I feel like search has one of the best possible chances at providing really relevant content information, because what we're looking at is what people are natively looking for anyway, right? And how they're talking about it, where they're searching for it, how they're phrasing things, like what they're doing once they've actually found it and interacted with it organically. So I think that when we're talking about the proliferation or change of content marketing tools, I truly believe that folks in the search and organic business like really have a great shot at creating something good. I just think that we have to be a little bit patient. The last thing he mentions is campaign management. And so like workflow, he's actually talking some about workflow here too. So, he's talking about like, can it integrate with something like Basecamp or project management? Does it allow you to kind of get in there and manage multiple things? I do feel like when you're talking about an enterprise platform, if you have a lot of people working kind of in the SEO environment, or if you have a lot of various teams that can benefit from this data, one of the things that's great about a bigger platform is, like at Ginza, one of the things we do is we do have task management. So you can create tasks from anywhere within the platform. We can access and share task lists. You can break them up, all that kind of great stuff. The other things that are included kind of in our workflow area is reports, and we do unlimited reporting. And reports are also able to be custom dashboards, which you can white label, but are like still modularized versions of the platform. So you can kind of get in there, dig around, create your own versions, and use that custom dashboard link to share with people who maybe only want to just see that information. So for example, you could have a custom dashboard that's like just for one particular client. You can also have custom dashboards that are for specifically like maybe somebody just cares about one type of campaign or content group or keyword group. Maybe somebody only cares about one segment of competitors and just wants competitor information. Maybe somebody really cares a lot about the search and social stuff combined. Maybe you actually have some contractors working for you and you just want to export like task lists and have them just be able to see recommendations, and you just want to see their progress of recommendations. Each of those people can kind of have a dashboard, but this means that this one big platform can actually be broken out into smaller segments that other people can use. So that tends to be really helpful. Automated reporting is also a really big deal for larger organizations and for agencies. So I know that a lot of times people feel like the worth of the platform itself is often justified by the idea that like they don't have to pay an account manager to sit around and create reports for 1 week of the month, if that person's entire job is just sitting around doing reporting for all their clients. So if you have an enterprise SEO tool that automates all this reporting stuff for you, even better, because then people can actually spend time doing analysis instead of like just number dumping. So Ian kind of concludes that yes, you should still be using a platform because of the great visibility and insight capabilities, and that a lot of the other features are nice to have depending on whether or not you'll use them. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about maybe who shouldn't use an enterprise platform. And obviously I'm not here to turn away business, but I do think that, one of the things I always say is that when I meet somebody that I don't think is going to be a very good fit for the platform, and we're in discussions, like whether that's in the middle of a demo or we're doing follow-up conversations, is I'm really honest. I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out. And, that's not because I don't want to work with someone. That's because I don't want to work on something where I don't think everybody's going to benefit, because I don't want you to not achieve your goals and blame the product for it. Or I don't want you to be frustrated with your experience with the tool, like with the platform itself. And I think that having positive interactions with the users is more important than having more users. All right. So a couple things like that I would say probably mean you're not a great candidate right now for an enterprise platform. And maybe it's not that you're not a great candidate or your company isn't a great candidate for an enterprise platform in general. Maybe it's just like not right now. Like maybe there's just needs to be a little bit of work to do. So the first thing is you're not going to use it regularly. You are already tapped out, you're using 20 different things, you have 50 different responsibilities, and this is going to be something that you just log into like once in a blue moon. It just may be too much, right? Like in terms of budget, like it just may be too much tool for what you're actually going to utilize it for. Maybe you need some time, or maybe you need a team member who actually will be able to utilize it and all of its insights more regularly. your department and the market, like, and your entire kind of marketing organization aren't aligned on goals. Now, this is a weird one, right? Because people will say like, well, why would that stop me from having an enterprise SEO platform? It actually doesn't stop you from getting it. You know, you can buy whatever you want. It's more, if you don't know how it is that you're going to be measured and people don't seem aligned on like what's most important for the department, this is going down as a budget line item that people aren't really sure how to like understand the impact of. And if everybody's goals aren't synced up, this may not be the best time to be jumping in on like a large platform. Next is you don't have any way to actually make changes based on the insights and recommendations from the platform. So this actually did happen like a year ago, and it was kind of heartbreaking. You know, somebody came in, signed up, really wanted to use platforms, really gung-ho about it, gets in there, gets all these great things going on, has all these insights, but then lacks the internal structure to be able to do anything to affect changes on their site. So it was one of those things where they were like, great, I'm going to give these recommendations to somebody. And that person was like, I'm not making these changes. So if you don't have the ability to affect change, or there's not a process in place for somebody to take these insights or recommendations or different things that are coming out of the platform and actually do something useful with them, get that part solved before you actually get the platform. Next would be, it doesn't integrate with any of the other things that you're using that are integral to your business. And I don't mean it doesn't have to integrate one-to-one, right? Like it doesn't have to be a direct API connection. It doesn't have to like necessarily hook up with data. What I mean when I say it doesn't integrate with other things that you're doing is, does this in any way, shape, or form actually fit logically in a process of things that are truly integral to your business? Or is this an integral piece of the business? And like, how does it fit with all the other things that you're doing? If you can't figure out like, if it's just kind of like its own standalone thing over here and everything else is like this well-working system, you need to figure out how or what is going to fit into this system to make sure that you kind of pick the right thing. Because that'll go back to usefulness. You won't use it if it doesn't integrate with all the integral things to your business. And the last thing that I always talk about is you don't know what you need. When I say you don't know what you need, saying like, well, I know I need an SEO platform is not what I mean. What I mean is you don't know what you need in terms of volume or in terms of features or in terms of functionality or like how it's actually going to do any of the things I just mentioned, right? Like you don't know what your marketing and team goals are, or people don't agree about them. You know, you don't have any way to actually utilize or make the changes that it's suggesting or to take the data and do something more with it. It doesn't integrate with other stuff that you're up to. So if you have to actually sit down and really think about it, because here's the thing, you may decide you want an enterprise SEO platform, but they're all different. While all of the tools out there can help you accomplish like various search related things, everything has a different place for different people's businesses. So do the research up front to figure out what it is you really need and why, and then have real conversations with folks based on that decision, because that's how you're going to get the thing that you're actually going to use on a daily basis, is because it's going to fit eventually seamlessly into a workflow that optimizes your marketing decisions. And the wrong tool is going to either be something that sits around and never gets touched and collects dust, or it's going to be the thorn in your side that you're constantly fighting with, and you feel like you're working for the tool and not the tool working for you. So that concludes our series kind of on like what makes an enterprise SEO platform for now. We're actually going to probably talk to some other folks about that, get a little bit more industry opinion. So you can always look up the show notes for this. Usually it takes us a couple days to get it up because it's Friday. But on the Ginzametrics blog, or you can check out our Twitter hashtag. We'll usually share show notes and links on our Twitter handle at Ginzametrics. You can also email me anytime. I'm Erin at ginzametrics.com. If you have suggestions, want to disagree with me, or suggest other topics for the show, I'm happy to hear them. Until next week, we will see you soon.